So on Innovate 2016, we've of course been focusing on this year, on the very near term, but there are bigger issues in the world of technology when it comes to government and regulation, and perhaps the biggest issue of all, the technology that will profoundly change everything, it's not blockchain, it's 5G. And who better to talk about 5G than my old friend, Hans Vestberg, the CEO and president of Ericsson, the world's, can we call them, Hans, would it be fair to say, you are the plumbing company for the world's technology?
I'm not sure plumbing is the right word, but definitely we are the platform for...
You're the backbone. You're the guys who make stuff happen.
Absolutely.
Without you, it doesn't work.
No.
So, Hans, 5G, when are we going to get it?
I think commercially it's going to be definitely launched 2020. What we see right now, it's going to come earlier trial systems already this year, next year trial systems. So I think that this technology is so expected and anticipated, so we're actually going to deliver it before the standard. Never happened in any other technology we have done. I mean, 2G, 3G and 4G came out as standard and adopted years after. 5G actually is going to be adopted before.
So is it as revolutionary as we hear? Will it increase most of our access, certainly mobile access to the internet by, 100, 1,000 times?
Absolutely. I think that one of the most important things by 5G is that we designed 2G, 3G and 4G for consumers, better throughput and higher speeds. And basically that's what we have done with it. 5G has a totally different way of constructing a network. You have slices in the network with different type of characteristics. I mean, in general, 5G can already today have 340 times higher speeds than 4G. So we can do 25 gigabit per second. We can get down to latency that is down to milliseconds. A 4G network is probably 30, 40, 50 milliseconds. We can create battery lifetime of 10 years. Today it's half a day. So suddenly you do a slice in a network depending on what type of device or what type of sensor is receiving the radio signal, and we can give them high speed, low latency or long battery life or anything else from the network. That will transform industries dramatically that we've never thought about, as well as going to give consumer advantage as well.
It's pretty amazing. What about the role of government, Hans? Do we need regulation to enable this, or will regulation hinder the emergence of 5G?
I think that the technology revolution that we see in front of us, that will continue, and we're going to end up 2021. There's only 300 million people on this earth that doesn't have mobile coverage. It's the best platform, the best infrastructure in the world in order to do digital services. My challenge is, of course, that consumers are going to do it, people like you and me, and everybody get a smartphone, and many people will get it in the next 5 years, basically doubling. Industries is getting it. They're starting to think about how can I use mobility, broadband, and cloud to transform my industry, if it's transport industry, finance industry, whatever. What is left, and what is probably the most important on this planet right now, is that governments, in order to have sustainable sort of solutions, they need to use ICT. If it's digital healthcare for inclusion of all the citizens, digital education, public services have the digital, all that needs to happen. And that's why I've spent time also with the Sustainable Development Goals the last couple of years, in order to tell all heads of states, you need to have ICT in your infrastructure in order to be able to address the larger challenges and do it sustainable.
So what you're saying then is that it's more important for governments to use 5G than to regulate it?
I think that 4G and 5G, for them is, I usually say that it's great when you have an auction of spectrum and the finance minister is super happy when you get a lot of money. I would rather have the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Healthcare saying, if I get coverage of all the country, so I can do a healthcare service or an education service, that's much more long-term and much more important to bring sustainable solutions for these countries and cities all around the world.
Hans, we've had some conversations on this show before about spectrum and network neutrality. How does 5G change that? Does it do away with the issue of spectrum? Does it mean that we should be more or less sympathetic to regulation around network neutrality?
I think that we'll be less worried about it. I mean,
you mean spectrum?
Yes, net neutrality. First of all, the spectrum is going to be unlicensed, licensed, 2G to 5G, Wi-Fi, everything included, and then we can use so much more bandwidth. That's how we build the technology today. That's number one. So we will enable that. Secondly, when it comes to net neutrality, I'm the first one to say everyone in the world has to have access to broadband because that will change their lives. However, when you think about 5G and what that can unleash, for everything from autonomous cars, or if it's remote surgeries or things like that, it has to be slices in the network that have different characteristics. If not, we're not going to get the efficiency of 5G. Impossible.
But network neutrality is all about prioritizing fast lanes. Given how fast 5G is, presumably there's no need for fast or slow lanes. Every lane will be extra fast.
All these lanes will have different characteristics. Let's say that you have latency or requirement or battery life. You don't need any speed for a sensor being in Amazonas that will have a battery life of 10 years. You don't need the speed. You only give them a low radio power signal, wake up the sensor, and then it falls asleep. So you can have differences on that. So I think that is solving a lot of things. But of course, consumers are going to get so much more speed. I mean, one of the first use cases that we didn't think about was that you're going to do TV and broadcast on 5G. It's not going to be a fiber to the home, you do 5G instead.
Hans, as I'm sure you know, the US government in particular with its Title II is becoming more involved with regulating the internet. That doesn't seem to be happening in Europe. Do you see a split between European and US policymakers when it comes to regulating the internet, particularly in terms of network neutrality?
Yes, we see differences, and first of all, one needs to acknowledge it's not an easy word to be a regulator. I mean, the telecoms, the broadcasting, and the internet all comes together in one implosion, and they were all regulated at verticals. Telecoms highly regulated, broadcast a little bit less, and internet very little, to be honest, in the beginning. Suddenly, the internet players can do a telecom service, the telecom player can do an internet service, broadcasters can do everything. It's just a mismatch. And of course, if you're a regulator, it's very hard now. How are you going to do a new regulatory regime? I think we need to rethink and do it per horizontal instead of vertical.
Per industry, you mean?
Yeah, per industry or solution. I mean,
so there could be network neutrality regulation when it comes to consumer, but perhaps not in medical or in emergency areas.
That's how, because right now, if you continue to do it vertically, you're going to disable some of the efficiency we can get from technology. Instead of building maybe more hospitals, we can take 30% of the load remotely, which is much more efficient for the planet. But if you're going to regulate that in vertical, it's going to be very hard. You need to take it by horizontal. And that's what we're seeing happening, at least in the minds of regulator, but it's far away from where they are today.
Hans, finally, 5G is so good. I want to touch it. I want a phone. I want to get on this network. There's nothing more annoying than slow access to the internet. You said we're going to get in a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. What's the biggest danger? What keeps you awake, not as the CEO of Ericsson, but as one of the more influential figures in the tech community? What could screw this up, 5G?
I think that first of all, what our industry has been extremely good at is to sort of have one standard. And why is that important? Because then we can get scale and get down the cost. It's a reason why we this year going to have 5 billion people having a mobile phone, and more than half of them being on mobile broadband. Because it's the same infrastructure we sell in Lagos as we sell to New York or to Stockholm. So of course, one of the worries I have with 5G, if we don't get a standard that we agree upon, it's going to be too costly, and then we're not going to get the mass deployment. So far it looks good, but the standard is going to be set in 2020. Then the second fear is, of course, when it comes to people, I'm not worried, they're going to use it in the right way. Industries, they get it. If they don't digitalize and transform, they're going to get hard. It's then ultimately the society and government to really understand to use the ICT platform to make a more sustainable world. That is a challenge, and here we need much more competence in governments. We need CTOs of governments, CIO of governments, thinking how do they do a digital infrastructure in order to deliver services to the citizens in a much more efficient way the next 20, 30 years.